Hello,
morning, Rick.
everybody. Welcome. And today is a wonderful day on the Energy News Beat podcast by Sandstone. My name is Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. And I mean, we've got a cool story to tell you today. We've got Mark Mills. Mark Mills, thank you very much. You are a wonderful follower on LinkedIn, and welcome and thank you for stopping by.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Great to be back.
I'll tell you, being a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, you're the president of the Digital Power Group for 20 years, Northwestern University School of Engineering. You got a pedigree here, sir. Strategic partner at Cottonwood Venture Partners. That's some pedigree now.
Although we changed the name of Cottonwood to Montrose Lane for those who are not. It should be. I think it's updated at my Magic LinkedIn site, but that's my buddies. Literally putting our money where our mouth is in terms of software and the future of energy and oil and gas.
And last time you and I had a podcast about a year ago, we were talking about how much the energy and fossil fuels were used on the renewables. Right. People have the misnomer that it is renewable is good, and your knowledge on the how much CO2 is generated in building wind farms.
Well, and it's just this inconvenient fact that everything in the world, from robots and computers to wind farms and any kind of power plant, you have to dig something out of the earth, use energy to convert it into something useful, operate a machine, and it wears out and you replace it. And all of that uses energy. And because hydrocarbons are roughly 82% of all world energy, that means somewhere, somehow, there's a lot of hydrocarbons being used to do everything.
I'm telling you, after that, it was kind of fun because you were throwing stats around. It's one thing to have a discussion, but it's another to back it up with facts. What's up with the world with facts? And my head's exploding because your book, The Cloud Revolution, just came out, and I pre-ordered it and got it on Amazon. And as you can tell here, I was getting ready for this. And Mark, when my wife goes, "What book are you?" She's tired, she's glad she doesn't have to talk to me. But the fun thing was, I was sitting here looking at this for my wife.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. She was like, "You've never done anything for me that way." And so what prompted you to write this book?
Well, in part, my wife, her inspiration. I mean, also she's been a partner in business, literally for a very long time, and has edited a lot of what I've written. She did not edit this specific book. She was the one that I would say, next to my mother, who came earlier, trained me to pay attention to how you form words and write. My wife, Donna Marie's been a terrific editor over the years and very insightful. So, what I hope is a book that is, accessible. I mean, it's a dense book because I have a lot of facts, but I tried to make it accessible to people who are not expert in the fields I write about, which is, again, driven by my wife's admonitions and editing over the years. So that's why did I write it? Because I think, especially young people and those of us who are older but hope to live longer, we live at a pretty exciting time, despite all the chaos politically, all the dystopian anxieties, which are always present. You don't have to be a historian, but it helps to read history. Human beings always create a lot of trouble, and we have political systems that don't work that well. We fight and have wars, but somehow the world is wealthier and healthier overall, much better place to live today than any time in history. And is it over? I mean, in a sense, and I use the phrase in my book, the new normalists. The new normalists are essentially saying, look, there'll be disruptions in specific industries. The banking industry has been disrupted by fintech, but it's just banking. And, news has been disrupted by the social media giants. True, but it's still news. There's nothing big going on, nothing that's going to propel the economy, nothing that's going to change lives ever again in any significant way. Let's go to the new normal of slow growth, get used to it. If that were true, and of course, my book, I try to make the case that it's affirmatively and profoundly not true. But if it were true, well, you should be a pessimist, because the only future wealth for the world will come from redistributing other people's wealth. If there's no net wealth growth,
Right.
then we go back to the Middle Ages, before the Middle Ages, where the primary mechanism for gaining wealth for a nation, let's use at that level, or a person, was to steal somebody else's stuff, as opposed to expanding the pie. Technology expanded the pie. Is it over? Not even close. I think we're on the cusp of the biggest boom since the 1920s, which is why my subtitle is The Roaring 2020s.
And that's one of the cool things about your book. And I'm sorry for being so stoked about this. We were teasing before we started. I'm almost
thank you. It's nice to have somebody stoked about the damn thing.
I'm almost a Mark Mills stalker, because I read all your stuff and everything else. But I really love the fact that you start in the 20s and all the way through the chapters, you say, wait a minute, here's the history of fossil fuels. Your chart in there on fossil fuels starts up here. Hey, we're burning wood. I mean, excuse me, renewables, and they're burning, and it's bad because you've got the cow dung and renewables and everything else in the houses, and it's not healthy for people. And then, there were some great things in there. So everything in here for our topics is just, like in the silicon, when we go from transistors. I worked at Intel for a while, and for 12 years. And we always made the joke that there must have been aliens, because when you go from the transistors starting to all of a sudden you have 500,000, processors in one chip, it's whatever the number is now. I mean, it's ungodly. And then Moore's law is the transistors would double every so many years.
Every 18 months, or double
every 18 months. Thank you. And
the thing that you're picking up on it that I was deliberate, but one has to constrain the excursions into history. So what I tried to do as I looked at each subject, whether it was machines and transportation, or employment and work, or energy, automation, communications, is you try to think in terms of the patterns in the past, or the history matters that's usefully predictive, but what happens in the future. Because, that old adage that history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. By that, what we mean is there are patterns that are predictive. So I looked at history's patterns and technologies briefly, as you know, and trying to map that out to what's going on now. What is the pattern? And is it echoing? Is it rhyming with? Is it similar to what happened last time? Because if there's a discontinuity, a change, then you want to know. So to your point, I worked at RCA back in the day when it was a semiconductor fab, and worked on large scale integration, contemporaneous with when Intel started. And so I spent my first part of my career designing processes for LSI. So we went from a time when in 1971, so here we are in the anniversary, right? This is anniversary number 50. So the CPU is 50 years old today, this year. Wow. 71 was the Intel 4004, which had, as you know, 4,000 transistors on it. So today, an Intel chip or an NVIDIA chip or an ARM chip, it'll have on it several billion transistors. The chip is bigger. I mean, the Intel chip was maybe that big, and an NVIDIA Intel chip maybe this big, but 3 billion transistors, not just from a bigger chip. And the biggest chip, this is a misnomer today, give a sense of the trajectory in that industry, is a dinner plate size, has 2 trillion transistors on it, made by a company called Cerebras. It's an AI chip for machine learning. But that trajectory started with the invention of a new class of switch. Vacuum tube becomes a transistor. The invention of something called an integrated circuit. So in silicon, not germanium. So now do we have anything like that today? Well, okay. How about biocompatible bioelectronics, CPUs? is that by that we mean, as you know, not just something I can wear on my skin, like an intelligent Band-Aid, well, there are those, but something I could implant voluntarily, like an implant, like a pacemaker, but something much more sophisticated, or something that I could swallow. Let's say what I call, as you know, a consumable computer.
Right.
I don't mean swallowing a 1980 IBM PC. I mean a computing function that's in a sensor that's smaller than a
Right.
smaller than a vitamin pill. So inside a vitamin pill is a biocompatible, self-disassembling. That is, it has a limited life, maybe it lasts hours or months. That the purpose of which is to take diagnostic information about you, or you give it to a cow because we really care about the health of the animals that we raise for food.
Right.
You could make biocompatible dust. That's our sensors that we sprinkle into agricultural fields that can be communicated with the way we communicate with Easy Pass. You don't have to have power in smart dust. You have to have power in the drone that overflies, interrogates the smart dust to ask questions like, do you need to be watered? Do you need fertilizer? So it's like asking the plant if it needs fertilizer. So this kind of bizarre expansion of the information system anchored in materials and sensors, this is consequential. I mean, and this is happening, if you read in my book, you know this, all across the landscape of what we do in society. So it's about much more than social media. In fact, I don't think and I've forgotten, if the words social media appear in my book, they might appear 5 times, because that's yesterday's news. It's important, but it's not new.
Right. And you sit back and you kind of go back, and also I get into, everybody is going in the anti-oil phase and everything else. These need oil in order. Do you like your iPhone? You want to have an iPhone, you got to have oil and gas. And the transition to renewables is going to take years. And the commodities boom that we're in right now, you talked about how the next boom is going to be the cloud boom. And some of the quotes in here are phenomenal when you sit back and go, natural gas supplies over 70% of the current energy used to fabricate glass and other things. And the scale of this, and everybody's bad mouthing natural gas, and we got to have it in order to do that. Like in Europe with the natural gas, they're going to have a food shortage because of fertilizer.
We're living in, this is an odd sort of siloed schizophrenia going on. We have, in a large measure, a camp of, we'll call them self-appointed futurists, who are saying all the innovation that we should care about is in so-called clean tech, wind, solar, and batteries, Teslas and wind farms. That's where innovation resides. That's where the competition for the future is. And then almost totally disconnected from that sort of meme are the people who are talking about virtual reality, augmented reality, the metaverse now because of what Facebook is talking about, robots and drones.
Right.
And the discussions are taking apart in 2 different magisteria as if they're not connected. You can't make stuff without using energy. You can't operate stuff without using energy. And if you invent things that didn't exist before, you create net new energy demand. So before there were airplanes, there was no demand for energy to either make them or fly them. Obviously, the world consumes, pre-pandemic, 8 or 10 million barrels per day just for flying. Before computers were invented, there was no demand for energy to make computers or operate them. But well, today, computing broadly, the cloud uses about as much energy as global aviation. So are innovators going to invent new things that will require more energy in the future? Well, of course. I mean, again, that's what I've tried to map out in my book. And it's not that we won't make the things that we already use more efficient. Of course we will. That's why they become more useful, because we make them more efficient, and then people use more of them. And energy use goes up or stays sort of flat, but we don't eliminate energy use by adding efficiency. We increase the utility of the thing by making it more efficient and cheaper, as you know. I mean, so connecting those dots is what I really wanted to do. So why did I write the book? I wrote the book because we're preoccupied with the wrong things. It is important how we produce energy, but there's no transition away from hydrocarbons, there's an addition coming from
Right.
wind, solar, and batteries, which is consequential. I mean, lithium batteries are genuinely quasi-magical that deserved a Nobel Prize. To your point, this wouldn't exist. One of the key inventions to make these work
Yep.
was the lithium battery.
Yep.
Otherwise, our phones would all look like a Gordon Gekko, giant brick that's made famous in that movie that dates us.
That was my first cell phone. This just dates me. Did you have one of them bricks that you held up your head and got a big? We had guns back then from holding up these cell phones.
You got that right, and you got about 30 minutes of total.
If you were lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah.
So hey, on back to the EV and everything else, and again, you come back to energy. You go from whale oil to cars.
Yes.
And this going from the 20s and whale oil and everything else. And you talk about, the EVs. Everybody's got the Tesla on the brain and they're thinking, hey, wait a minute. I got to have me a Tesla. And you're sitting. That's the way we talk in Texas. I got to have me a Tesla. That's now that
well, pretty soon you're going to get a Ford Lightning. That's what you're going to want to buy, I think.
Oh, Lightning.
Oh, the Ford electric pickup truck. You got a full size pickup. Actually, an F-150 size. That's like a Tesla, all battery power. Right? Ford. I mean, heck, if you're using your truck just for driving to work, which is probably about 90% of trucks in Texas, my guess.
Right.
Then maybe electric one's fine for you. Why not?
Well, I'll tell you, electric in Texas, when I go out to the Panhandle and when I go to Midland to work.
That's a little different. That's a long hike there.
Yes. And so Texas, we got some long roads. And when I'm on a rig out there and things, you don't want that.
Well, but actually that speaks to the utility function differences, right? I mean, if you want to drive to work 5 miles a day, 10 miles, your commute consumes 20 miles. You actually own a house, which is not true for everybody, but for a lot of people in Texas, you have a place to charge it overnight. If you want to take a drive to West Texas and haul a lot of stuff for people, batteries become problematic, not impossible, just very inconvenient.
Right.
And of course, look, the essence of this Tesla debate, which is fascinating to me, is that if first you can unbundle the technical argument, we got to give credit to Elon Musk for doing something nobody's done in a century. I was on the Car Doctor radio show yesterday, so it's about cars. I love cars. I grew up as a mechanic, raced motorcycles. So I love engines. I love batteries. I repaired electrical equipment too. I worked on radios and TVs. I'm agnostic to power sources. You want to find out what works.
Right.
The Tesla was made possible by the genius of Elon Musk. Nobody has started a car company successfully in a century. Subsidies aside, it's not enough to explain it. It just isn't. It's a good car. It's the most impressive engineered battery in the world still. I don't think anybody's engineered as high a quality, high a density, valuable, large. The battery weighs, most people don't know this, half a ton. The battery in a Tesla electric car is 1,000 pounds. Wow. But it's a complex machine of cooling systems, heating systems, thousands of welds, battery control electronics, battery management for charging. And it's a tour de force of complex engineering, which sounds a lot like an internal combustion engine. Let's just say it's a matter of record in terms of complexity.
Right.
But the point is, whether a car is fueled by electrons in a battery, or which is electrochemical process, or fueled by electron exchange in a combustion process, which is a physical chemistry process, whether that energy, whatever, it's still a car. If it was a gerbil in a treadmill with the rubber bands wound up and it worked fine, it's still a car. The car was a revolution over the horse.
Oh,
but changing the food that the horse ate wasn't revolutionary. I mean, different farmers would have got the money, but going from oil to batteries is like changing the food horses ate. It's not a revolution in economic utility function. It changes some things, but it doesn't change much of the world. What I'm interested in are what are the transportation modalities, new things that will change the world. Well, easy. Everybody would say, well, how about drones or flying freight or flying cars? Well, yeah, that'd be a big deal if you could make it practical. It looks very clearly based on things that already exist. And as you know, there are at least 100 different startup drone companies at various stages of
Yep.
development, a few actually in commercial flight that can move freight autonomously by air, packages up to tens of kilograms, not really heavy freight yet. But
Right.
this is a distinction with a difference, as they say. This, and the fact that it is now possible is a consequence of
Right.
the confluence that I write about in my book. It's materials,
Right.
materials revolution, a change in the kinds of machines we have that
Yep.
can make things. And it's an information revolution. These things have to be driven by very complex computers that can't weigh more than a few grams and can't consume a lot of energy.
Right.
The combination makes eventually the flying car possible. Now, the flying car will come before the autonomous car on the ground, in my opinion, just because of the physics of communication. But both are now clearly in our future. The flying taxi,
Right.
probably sooner by a fair bit in suburban areas, not urban areas.
Yep.
And then the flying personal car, quote,
Right.
that got denigrated because flying cars have been promised since 1943 when Henry Ford predicted them. We've been predicting flying cars for almost a century. Turns out it's a really hard piece of engineering that involves a lot of things that no one knew how to do until around now.
Right. But in your book, you also
they'll use a lot of energy. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, oh no. You talk about the inverse effect of you've got the small drones right now, and they've got a power supply, and they're limited to the amount of weight that they can carry.
Right.
If you get bigger and bigger, there's a certain trade-off where you got to go to fossil fuels in order to get there. How soon do you think that transition is going to come into that next level? Because isn't that the biggest problem right now, to go to big kind of drones?
Sure. I mean, so the thing that's fascinating here, again, this is why I sort of mapped my book out the way I did, is to answer that question, you have to know something about physics limits of the primary energy sources, something about the state of the technologies that exist today. What can we actually build with available machines and materials? Not what we might imagine we'd like to build. And then you want to imagine, are there any game changers in terms of we'll call it the discovery of not the underlying process, but game changers in the discovery of how I can build something. Can I use computers, in short, to accelerate the innovation process by doing in silico testing an airframe in a computer simulation instead of on a real airframe? The answer is yes, but it takes a hell of a powerful computer. Once I say that, everybody's in their head as well. Okay, we have powerful computers. It turns out the power you need to do full flight simulation, let's just use flying as an example, we're about one generation away from that being cost effective and feasible. But when I say one generation, the generations of supercomputers switch over every 5 years to sort of a new plateau. So we're a couple of years away from doing in silico flight testing of new designs for airframes in the very near future. Now, how will I power it? Well, it depends on what I want to carry. Power to weight ratio. If you're a gearhead and you race, or if you're a pilot, everybody knows if you're not tethered, all that matters is power to weight ratio. I want maximum energy in the smallest weight of fuel possible so that I can actually carry cargo. So this is where the physics comes in. It matters. The energy density of lithiated chemicals, that is the maximum amount of energy inherent in the molecules of lithiated chemicals, which are very energetic, measured in battery terms, is 500 watt hours per kilogram. That's what you can have before you make a battery. And you have lower energy density as you make the battery because of infrastructure. Oil, remember, 500 watt hours per kilogram is theoretical energy density. Oil theoretical energy density is 12,000 watt hours per kilogram. So will we keep using oil to power machines that fly? For a very long time. But for small machines, for short distances, batteries are actually more than adequate. It depends on your duty cycle and weights and velocities, but it's perfectly fine. I happen to think, as I wrote, that the killer app, as they say, in fact, for aviation is the hybrid. It's using hyper efficient, small internal combustion engines with the electric airframe and batteries. When you hybridize, you get all kinds of optionality, all kinds of efficiency, all kinds of safety benefits. And those are
Yep.
the things that matter in the end, not whether we're using oil or not. Come on.
I've been such a big fan of hybrids because, the old World War II submarines were hybrids. I
Yes.
mean, that was a great design. And when you run a World War II submarine off of the generators, they pop those bad dog generators up, and they are designed to redo those batteries. Those were some big batteries, and the technology in those old World War II submarines is phenomenal.
Well, they were, this is a great example in history, and I didn't put that in my book, but it's a great one. You sort of have to pick and choose examples. Otherwise,
Yep.
instead of a 400-page book, it becomes 800 pages. And
Oh, you bet.
then it's a real doorstop, not, no. But,
Oh no, I've been sleeping with this one for a while. So I mean, no.
but you're
Sorry.
right about the architecture of hybridization is known for a long time. But
Right.
to make it really useful, you want a couple things to happen. You want the engines themselves become even more efficient and smaller, which has
Right.
happened from engineering and better materials. You want the battery itself become much more energy dense. Obviously, World War II were lead acid batteries. We're now into lithium, which gets you 4 times the density.
Yep.
It's a big deal. And then to make hybridization really work, because you're switching between the chemical, electrical, and mechanical worlds. You're trying to mediate 3 different pieces of physics, which all have different velocities, behaviors,
Yep.
really complex. To do it optimally and safely, you need very sophisticated sensors and control systems, computers.
Right.
That was done, reasonably well, but not with the degree of low cost, high efficiency that's now very easy to do, which is why hybridization is becoming the sort of the sine qua non of drivetrains.
I would love to figure out, and I would buy a 150 today if it was a hybrid. I mean, you put in even a 4-cylinder in that bad dog and give me electronics so that thing can charge the battery while I'm going out. I'd write a check right now today.
Yeah, there's
So,
these so-called there's series hybrids or parallel hybrids that have,
right.
say, 20 to 30 mile range batteries, and then an internal combustion engine gives you
Right.
that dual function: commute to work,
Yep.
battery never comes on, you can plug it in if you want. The disadvantage of those currently is that you have to have 2 drivetrains, right? You have to have
Oh, yes.
so it costs a little more. You can't pay for it in pure savings of the cost of gasoline, because if you want if it's just money you want to deal with, the best pickup truck you could buy from a pure fuel efficiency basis is the new mid-size pickup that Ford announced this year, and it gets a all-in gas miles almost 40 miles per gallon for
Oh, wow.
it's
Yeah.
a supercharged 4-cylinder engine. It we automakers know they can make internal combustion engines incredibly efficient.
Right.
On average, people have not wanted to pay for that because they cost more. So we're moving into a world that's partly animated by, I should save fuel because of the climate. I get that.
Right.
So if you think that, whatever. But really what's driving, and no pun intended, the progress of these new drivetrains is that we're a wealthier economies. People have the luxury, when you have a lot of money, to say, I just like the idea. There's a reason that there are, I think that the total number of automakers in the world, niche and major, is roughly 100 to 120. There's a lot of,
Okay.
and the number of models of cars that exist, of course,
Yep.
thousands. If the only metric was get 4 people in a car or 2 people in a flatbed and optimal efficiency and meet the safety standards, there'd be 4 models of cars, not 1,000 or 4,000.
Right.
So people buy options because they buy for reasons other than pure utility, which is a measure of wealth, right? That's what that's a measure of.
But Mark, you said just a little bit ago that you are a automobile enthusiast and motorcycle enthusiast. So you buy from emotion, don't you?
Exactly. Most people,
Yeah.
as all automakers know, as Elon Musk knows full well, people buy brands because brands are emotional. But you still have to make a quality product. It's very difficult to have a brand of any product or service. I don't care if it's a restaurant, a delivery service. They've got to do 2 things: deliver incredible value, reliability.
Right.
But you as a consumer, we all will, for many, many things, will pay up for the emotional feature, the content, the brand feature. Well, that's human nature. But that we can afford to do that is the whole point of my book. I come back to my book. If there's more wealth, we have societies that
We got
have.
to plug the book a few times. Sorry.
I mean, wealth creation is what we want to have happen for the, for more people than we have had happen in the last century. The last century has seen American per capita wealth, the average wealth, rise 700% in real inflation adjusted terms. Nowhere else in the world has that happened.
No.
It's the biggest gain in personal average wealth in all of human history, period. Where did it come from? Two things. It came from an economic, social system, political system that allowed the flourishing of entrepreneurs, but the entrepreneurs had to have something to invent an innovative build. It came from technology. So we started out, why did I write the book? I wrote the book because America, I still believe, set aside politics of the day, is still America. Still, I think the culture is largely intact with fractures, and I'm very aware of the fractures, challenges. We've always had challenges, but we have incredible opportunity technologically today. You remember it in the preface, I wrote about the challenges. People just forget. We forget the pain. We don't read our history. The 1920 began. It was a horrible, horrible year in many respects. Third cycle of the pandemic of 1918, this third deepest recession in the 20th century occurred in 1920. We had race riots all over the country. I mean, dozens of people killed, thousands of federal troops, police called out in the streets. I mean, that was the year that the Army Air Force, you want an example of grotesque problems, bombed the Black neighborhoods of Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I was about to say that. That is a horrible, horrible thing.
Grotesque. I mean, look, the racial tensions then were off the charts, and the country had, obviously has struggled with these issues for a long time. It wasn't this that we weren't struggling with them then. We also had 1920s was the rise of one of the most odious scientific facts and theories of maybe all of history, which was eugenics movement. Eugenics were seen as settled science, accepted by all the intelligentsia, all the major universities, including all of the Ivy League. What a grotesque scientific theory. That ignited debate and angst and anxieties of our time. There was a wealth disparity then, the Gold Coast of the quote robber barons. I mean, the wealth disparity then was off the charts. We are beginning to approach that same level of wealth expansion, if you like, here. We're still not there yet. There's nobody as wealthy in real terms yet as Rockefeller was in the 1920s. But Bezos and Musk they're creeping up there. They'll get there. It'll ignite the same kind of political anxieties now as it did then, already is.
Right.
So I mean, the point of that, as you know, is that it's easy to think our problems are unique because they're different in specifics, but they're not different in character.
But, if you think, Mark, just like that Tulsa was so horrific, but we've had 3 other commodity booms in the history, and we are now in the 4th commodity boom. And wealth separation, the wealthier get wealthier and the middle class goes away in commodity booms. And I've been writing that this is going to be the single worst commodity boom for wealth separation ever because of energy. And
you're right.
And I'm sitting here, everybody are going like, nobody's listening. And it's kind of like, hey guys, we're here.
It's already started. So let me agree with you on what's happening and then suggest to you why I think we have the opportunity that is possibly unique in history to moderate and mediate and conquer the destructive effects of a commodity boom. Because commodity booms are great for the sellers of the commodities. Right. The traders always do well. Well, first, traders always do well. They're like lawyers, always do well. So I picked the wrong profession. I should have been a legal trade. Anyway, but you're right. We have 2 things going on. If we have a period of growth, and we are in the V-shaped recovery, the world wants to grow. and it wants to keep growing off the recovery from the shutdowns. So
Right.
that drives demand for goods and services, drives energy demand, and you can't change the fact, as you know, let's stick with the hydrocarbon commodities, 84% of all energy
Right.
are oil, coal, and gas. Simultaneous with that, the governments of the world are providing disincentives to invest in production. Uncomplicated, that drives a boom in price. So despite the short-term oscillations, the net tailwind is higher. And we know this because even with the recent announcement that the shale industry in America looks like it's really dramatically increasing current plans for investing, it'll still only be at 80% of the level of spending pre-COVID.
Right.
So the world's already blown past oil demand pre-COVID, as you know, globally. And the world has not come close to resurrecting oil production. So that means prices go up. Simultaneously, governments of the world, as you know, are pushing subsidies for wind, solar, and batteries. As you know, I've talked about this before. Since you and I talked last, several major studies have come out pointing to the fact that I had identified from other studies earlier. The world is not now producing, nor planning to produce, a sufficient quantity of the minerals that are needed, common ones like copper, nickel, manganese, steel, and lithium. There are not enough mines in the world, nor planned in the world. In fact, there aren't enough known reserves, never mind mines, of the minerals needed to meet these goals. So long before the goals go away, and they will go away, demand will push prices up, not overnight. These things, tipping points, and all of a sudden they just boom for all the commodity minerals, which will spill over into all the other markets that need those minerals. Because if electric car takes 300% more copper, you don't think that's going to increase the cost of the car when copper demand go? Come on. So what do we know? You'll get this big boom, and we already saw it start, by the way. So photovoltaic panel prices are up this year, about 20%. Reverse the long run decline. Why? Because coal is more expensive in China. China makes 90% of the panels. Polysilicon is incredibly electric intensive to make, so they went up. Battery prices, which have been for Teslas and the like, have been on decline now for decade plus because of the learning curve. They dropped by 20% a year, 30% a year, just boom, 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 from $1,000 a kilowatt hour now to 180. Big drop. They only dropped a few percent in 2020, and they're going to go up. We look backwards at what happened in 2021, they'll be up. They're going to go up, reversing the trend. Why? Because 70% of the cost to make a battery are the commodities: nickel, cobalt, lithium, manganese. So how do people think that these batteries are going to get cheaper in the future when 70% of what they're made from is a commodity? Commodity means it's already in mass production, and we're going to increase demand 1,000% and expect the price to go down. So what happens? We'll have a double whammy, which will make everybody unhappy, consumers and politicians. Your gas-powered car will be more expensive to build and more expensive to run. Your electric-powered car will be more expensive to build and more expensive to run. So they're both going to go up. No one's going to win. Everyone loses, including consumers. The only winners are the commodities traders, and to a limited extent, the miners. But the miners don't. No producer really wants a bubble, because bubbles get you blamed. The last time we had an oil price bubble, remember what happened? We passed the windfall profits tax, which people have forgotten about, and you criminalize the profit that you're making that you had nothing to do with creating. Right? You didn't let the price go up. Bad policies did. But when you get profits from that, the government comes along and says, oh, guess what? You were criminally offensive. I'm taking anyway. That's what will happen. But what will happen after that is the real question. We'll have a period of high prices, commodity boom. How long does it last? It lasts as long as two things go on. That's as long as policymakers stay stupid. And that could be forever. No, I'm kidding. As long as the current policymakers stay in power and keep stupid policies in place, I think there becomes a political revolution, and we change our attitudes toward production of everything. I don't just mean production of oil and gas. We'll change our mind about producing stuff. Stop making it hard to produce stuff, because we want cheaper stuff. So I think that attitude will change. But what will also change is the toolkit to drive efficiencies is changing.
Right.
So we'll use oil as an obvious example. There's going to be a lot of pressure on the oil fields to improve productivity and efficiency with with a lower workforce.
Right.
Because they've been told not to come here because it's a bad place to be. You should go work and build solar panels. Partly because it's just a cultural shift. Partly an age shift. That's what happens. So what will happen is the oil industry will be forced to use more automation, more software, not because they really love it. Nobody loves nobody loves to change how they do their business. But the velocity of efficiency improvements in those tools, as you know, is very high once you figure out how to use them. So I think the combination of robots in the cloud, AI, intelligent assistants, intelligent analytics, that's made useful. By that I mean with user interfaces that non-programmers can use, which is hard to do. That's what's coming.
Yes.
That combined with robots that are useful. When I say useful there, I mean the same thing. You can't cage the robot so it can't go near a person because the robot might kill them by accident. That's what we've been doing with robots for 60 years, right? You put them in cages to keep people away from being killed. Robots have to be able to work where humans work, cobots. But that's a very difficult technical problem. It's been solved. We know how to make control systems so that we can cohabit with machines that'll make me more productive.
Yep.
So this trend, which is not notional, as you know, these are all tools that already exist, that are already viable for a significant share of the market, both the virtual and both the AI, call it the robot tools. Those are now accelerating into commercial viability. That reality, which has nothing to do with plans of government, is going to save us from long-term inflation and long-term commodity boom.
Wow.
When I say that, I don't mean it to take 10 weeks to conquer, but I think history will look back and see the boom and say, look at that one. That commodity cycle was shorter than any one in history.
Right.
I think that's what we're going to see.
I sure hope so. And, I was sitting here thinking about everything you were saying, and I think that you're going to see the political incompetence change. They've done a stealth launch on their news story. And if anybody heard the new accords that were going on that we just had in the COP26, they put in the COP26, natural gas is considered a renewable, and they stuffed that in the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill has natural gas as a renewable. Nobody picked that up. And I'm sitting here kind of going, you did, but I'm sitting here kind of going, hey, wait a minute. Now you're going to see everybody go, natural gas is okay. And it's going to be because they realize natural gas has got to be there, and they're going to have to prove to their base that they're not stupid.
Well, I think what will happen is, again, both will happen. We're not going to get rid of dumb policies and subsidies for wind turbines and batteries and cars. It's going to keep going. It just it's very hard to unwind that stuff. So, but what will happen is this realization. Europe saw it because of the continent-wide wind lull. So continent-wide wind lulls are very predictable.
Right.
They happen constantly over the decades. What's unpredictable about them is exactly when they occur. So that feature is devastating for electric grids, because it's going to happen. If you're a politician, you pray it doesn't happen on your watch, because if it does, you get what happens in Europe. You get blackouts and massive price increases, plants shutting down, fertilizer going away. It's really ugly, right? So the solution, more natural gas, more oil, but you do both. So here's the bottom line. Here's what's going to happen.
Okay.
The cloud and robots are going to allow the oil and gas industry to make lots of oil and gas cheaper in the future than in the past, which will save the bacon of the people who are forcing expensive stuff on the economy simultaneously, because the expensive stuff is still a minority of the supply. So if I have expensive batteries, expensive windmills, and they are expensive to operate the way we operate them, but I take the pain out. In fact, they can even completely hide the higher cost of those things by having real cheap hydrocarbons, which is effectively what we've done for the last 20 years. And we'll keep doing that, because I don't have any illusions that we're going to suddenly say, oh, gee, you're right. We need oil and gas. So let's stop all the solar and wind stuff. That's not going to happen. What will happen is we'll do both, which is, to be fair, in a democracy and in a world, we don't know really what the future is. And you always need all the above. That's fine. And is there some corruption and graft and kleptocracy and all this? Yeah, gee, what a surprise. I mean, newsflash.
Yeah, it's been around a long time.
You just want to rein it in as much as you can. And
Yep.
the pure theft is obviously, you don't need new laws for that. The kleptocracy is what you have to rein in, because being a kleptocrat's not illegal. Putting your finger on the scale to make sure you get more money out of the infrastructure bill than some other party.
Yep.
That always goes on, but the fix to that are not new laws. It's that old adage, sunlight. Just make sure we all know where the money went. Who got
sunlight? I like that one.
Follow the money. That's the best use of solar energy, in my view, right there. Follow the money.
Follow the money. Mark, I'd say I want to give you the last word, but you've had such a lot of great. I'm going to have to transcribe this and then go through it all again. And I want to give you a shout out again, the Cloud Revolution. And I'm a fan. And I guarantee you that I'm going to go out to Amazon and I'm going to make sure everybody else does give you a great review, because this is one of those books. And I hate to say it, but you got a lot of references in here that are like, you're not making this stuff up.
Right. That was, I forget how many references, maybe 800 or 900. The whole point of the references is exactly this. If you look at what's happening, and we didn't talk much about the material science revolution and what's going on in manufacturing, which I write a lot about as well. The key for me of looking at the future is not trying to guess about what you'd like to have happen, but to find out what somebody's already done and that's commercially viable, which is the point of a reference, and to say that's a consequential thing. It's like, again, 71, invention of a transistor that was a microprocessor, an integrated circuit. That was consequential. We couldn't have predicted everything that would happen from that. But when I was in that industry, and you were too, you knew it was a big deal. You knew some of the things that it enabled, like better computers, smaller, faster computers. You knew that. Everybody knew that.
Right.
Arthur C. Clarke, as I quote in my book, said he stood in a computer room, which we'd call today a data center at the time. I think he did the interview in late 60s.
Right.
And so you got the spinning, tape drives, and he's standing there predicting that computers will be not on desktops, but handheld by the turn of the century. How did he know that? Well, it's not a science fiction writer. He was a very smart scientist.
Yep.
That's, to me, what's exciting about where we are today. We have those kinds of transformations going on, and I tried to document it, and I hope I make people as excited about the prospects, because if we are, maybe we'll let the entrepreneurs do their business.
Yep. And I truly think we're going to need all forms of energy, and the way to get there is clean energy tech. Tech. The key there, Mark, is tech. And again, I hate to keep bragging about your book, but man, it is there. So I hope I can have you back on.
Keep bragging. That's fine. Thank you.
I hope I can have you on a podcast again. And I'm going to have all your contact information as we release this. We'll tag you. And everybody needs to follow Mark Mills on LinkedIn and anywhere else, because I guarantee you he is a wealth of knowledge, besides having a fantastic haircut. And I mean, I'm right there with you, Mark. So thank you for stopping by the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk. Appreciate it.